2 videos ago, you saw me sitting here threading up for some summer and winter, and I wanted to give you an update on that project. I have woven like a full pattern repeat, and I sort of regret that I didn't get any footage of that, but I am going to take you through a little bit just so that you can see what I've been doing, the things that I came across that were problems and how they were corrected. So you can see here that I have got the lovely image of the summer and winter. The main problem that I'm having with it at the moment is that I really wanted the blue to be dominant and to really have a lot of coverage on the front or the top view. And as you can see from here, what I'm showing you here, you can definitely see the pattern, and the pattern looks lovely, but the blue doesn't have that kind of coverage that I was after. Now, initially, after doing the threading for this and doing the tie-up, which was one thing that I was quite apprehensive about and wasn't really sure about, but I thought that I'd figured it out pretty well and I was feeling pretty proud of myself. And then I started weaving and I thought, I'm not really sure if this is the correct pattern that I'm seeing here. It has elements of the pattern that I want to see, but at the same time it looks too geometric or angular. You can see it on your screen at the moment. That's what I was getting initially. So I went to my wonderful members group and asked there if anyone might have some ideas about where I had gone wrong. And there's a wonderful lady called Liz who is very experienced with these kind of things. She's done a bit of summer and winter herself, and she currently works on a draw loom. I'm going to link to her Instagram down below so that you can go and follow her. She does really beautiful work. But she actually took the time to go through the draft and sort of rewrite it and rearrange it. She also rearranged the tie-up, which made a major difference. So I basically followed the draft that she showed me that she had put together along with what is called a skeleton tie-up. Now, I had never done a skeleton tie-up before. So 2 things in this brand new project. I was trying summer and winter for the first time, and I was trying skeleton tie-up for the first time. That seemed a little bit scary, but actually the skeleton tie-up makes so much more sense. I'm going to show you and explain to you a little bit more about that in a moment. So following that draft and tie-up that Liz put together for me, I was able to get the pattern. Now, as far as the lack of blue coverage, she suggested that I needed a looser set. Now, from what I had read, and I've read quite a bit about summer and winter now, you set it for plain weave as you would for plain weave. So I did that. I set it at 20 ends per inch for my 8/2 cotton, and I thought that that would probably be just right. Liz said that she would be more likely to use something like a 16 ends per inch. Now, I didn't have enough warp. This is like one of the first times that I've ever regretted putting on a shorter warp because I've run out of space really quickly. If I had more warp, then I would cut this off and then I would reslay at 16 ends per inch, just so that I could see whether that was the real issue or not, but I just really don't have the warp left to do that. So I will do that next time. I'm going to try for a lower set and see whether that gives the pattern weft a little bit more room. Some of you might be thinking, well, you need to use a bigger pattern weft, but what I've done here is I've used the 8/2 cotton and I'm using a fingering weight wool. So there is a lot of difference in the weight between my 2 yarns, and I would have thought that would give me enough coverage, but it hasn't. I did have a particular style from coverlets, a summer and winter coverlet that I've seen in mind when I started this, and so I wanted to see a lot of blue, and I really only wanted to see the white showing up as the pattern. And so I do need to figure out whether that's the problem of the set or whether there's something else going on. I've been beating pretty firmly, but maybe I need to change my beat pattern so that it's even more firm. And then Liz also suggested to get this off the loom and wet finish it and see whether it looks any better afterwards. So I will be doing that soon, but I wanted to leave it on here to at least show you today what it looks like on the loom. So now I want to talk about the skeleton tie up a little bit, and also just show you a basic overview of how it looks weaving summer and winter on a floor loom, if that's interesting to you. We're going to have a look at the treadles first, because that's going to make the actual weaving part make more sense. So what I had initially in my tie-up is that I had all 10 treadles tied up, but with the skeleton tie-up, the idea is that it's a more economical use of your treadles. And so with the skeleton tie-up, I'm actually using 8 treadles instead of 10. So the skeleton is really, really useful to know if you have a pattern that you really want to weave, but your loom doesn't have enough treadles. You may find that you can do a skeleton tie-up for it instead. Okay, so this is very different to what I'm accustomed to, because say if I was weaving an overshot with the tabby background, the pattern weft, normally I would put my tabbies on either side. So this would be my 1 and 3 tabby, and then I'd put my 2 and 4 tabby over this side, so that every time my shuttle was starting on this side, I knew that I was to use this tabby, and every time my shuttle was starting on this side, I knew to use that tabby. But with the skeleton tie-up, that could be a little bit confusing, having the tabby on either side, and I'll tell you why. So in the middle here, all of these 4 treadles are my pattern shafts. So this is pattern A, B, C, D. The pattern is woven trompe as writ, which means that it's the same treadling pattern as the threading is. You just follow the same sequence. So I think of these as treadles A, B, C, and D, just like I do for the threading for the blocks A, B, C, and D. And for each pattern shaft that is operated for your treadle, you also have to operate a tie-down shaft. This is one of the particulars of summer and winter. And also each part is woven as a unit. So it's not just one pick and you're done. It's actually 4 picks per unit. So when I'm weaving the A treadle, first of all, I'll start by pressing down A. But along with A, I need to press down a tie-down treadle. So my tie-down treadles are over here, and they are in the order of 1 and 2. You can put your tie-up in any order that makes sense to you, but this is a really good order, because again, you can use your shuttle position on whether it's on the left or the right to help you know where you're up to. So my shuttle would be on the left at the moment. I'd press down my first treadle, my first pattern treadle A, but I would also press down the tie-down treadle of number 1. And if you were doing this for the first time, or you were kind of challenged by, keeping up with your treadles and knowing where they were, then I would advise you to put some sort of sticker or something on these to indicate what they are. So that is the first pattern pick, and that's got to be followed by a tabby pick. Remember, the 2 tabby picks are over here. So this is my first tabby pick and my second tabby pick. So because my shuttle was on the left and I was going through to the right, I'm going to do the left hand tabby pick. That's halfway through the first unit. So then for the second part, we go back to this first A treadle, but this time when I press it down to take the pattern weft through, I'm using the tie down treadle of 2. So the opposite one to what I used before. I'd throw that pattern pick, beat it, and then I follow up with my second tabby, because every pattern pick has to be followed by a tabby. And this time, because my shuttle's coming from right to left, I use my right hand tabby. Now all of this, admittedly, it takes a while to get used to and to figure out how to do, but I find it actually very friendly and very fast to learn. And because you've only got 4 pattern treadles, I think that really helps. So another particular of a skeleton tie-up is that you are pressing more than one treadle at once, and that's what allows you to be a little bit more economical with your treadles. Is with a direct tie-up you're just pressing one treadle at once, and so you need to use more treadles to get those shafts in. And to be honest, I have not found it any more difficult using two treadles at once than using one treadle at once. It's just another way to do the same thing, but I do find it works pretty well. So now let's have a look at how the weaving looks at the top, and we'll try and get a shot of the treadling at the same time to show how that's corresponding. Okay, so I'm just going to start at the beginning. I did finish up here and I've just put in a few rows of plain weave just to differentiate. So I'm going to start with that pattern block A, which is my first pattern treadle, and at the same time I'm going to treadle my tie down treadle 1. Then I'm going to take my pattern weft through, which is my wool. I'm going to beat first on the open shed and then on the closed shed. That was something that I was also advised to do to try and get more of those blue peaks in. And then I've got to follow up with my first tabby. So I'm going to go all the way to the left and press on that tabby treadle. Okay, that's half of the unit done. Now the second half is going back to that treadle A, that first pattern treadle, but this time we're pressing on the second tie down treadle. Going back with the pattern weft, you notice that I'm using floating selvages here. And then I'm going to follow up with the tabby again. This time it's going to be the second tabby or the right hand tabby. Okay, that is one complete unit. So then I can go on to the next one, and the next one's going to be pattern treadle 2 or block B. So I'm bringing in my pattern weft again, block B, and I'm on the left, and it's my first pattern pick for this new block, so I'm going to use treadle 1 of my tie downs, which is also my left hand tie down treadle. Then I'm going to follow that up with a left hand tabby because my shuttle's going from left to right. And that's how I can keep track of my tabby. Now I'm going back to that treadle B for pattern, a second pattern treadle, and I also need my second tie down treadle, which is on my right. And then I follow up with a right hand tabby. Now I'm going on to my third pattern pick, which is my C. And then I'm going to follow that up with a left hand tabby. And then I'm going to do that same C treadle again. So my third pattern pick treadle. And I'm going to do that along with the second tie down or the right hand tie down. Then I'm going to follow up with my right hand tabby. All right, I think we'll do one more, which is the last pattern pick, because at the start of the treadling you're just going through the sequence of the pattern treadles. So this is my block D, and I'm going to need my tie down treadle 1. Take that through. Follow up with my left hand tabby. And then back to D, this time with the tie down treadle 2, the right hand one. And then my right hand tabby, and so on. Well, that's interesting. From what I've just woven with you just now, from beating twice, I can see that the blue is packed in better than it was before, where I hadn't been beating twice. So for all of this part, I've been beating firmly, but I hadn't been beating twice, but here I have. So this is beating first on the open shed, then on the closed shed, and it really does make a visible difference. So there's another summer and winter weaving tip for you. So I'm going to finish off just weaving this little extra bit that I've got to do here, especially now that I've discovered that that double beat does make a difference. And then once I've wet finished this, we will revisit this together and just see how it turned out after all. In the meantime, if you are really interested in coverlets, in summer and winter overshot coverlets, then I'd like to recommend a couple of people to you. The first one is Cassie Dixon. She's been a major inspiration to me and in my coverlet journey, and she's also given me some really great advice. Cassie often grows, dyes and processes her own linen thread, which is just amazing. And I'm going to leave her Instagram link below so that you can go and have a look at her very inspiring account. And the other person is Justin from the Burrows Garrett. Once you see his page, you'll know that no words are necessary. His work is just amazing, and so are his looms. So I'll link to him down below as well. I just had to come back and show you this because I've been doing this extra bit of weaving. Can you see what a mega difference this has made doing that double beat? This is how I was before, doing the firm single beat. Even the fabric feels really different. Like this fabric down here feels much, much looser than this fabric up here. But doing the double beat has really helped to bring in the pattern, to bring in those wefts, and so the pattern looks better because it doesn't look so elongated. The squares look more square and all of that, but you can see so much more blue. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about this, and I'm happy that there is a solution. I still do want to play with that set and make it a little bit wider, but I actually feel really good about this now. To know as well, just while I'm looking at this, your opinion on if you could imagine this as a bedspread or something similar. Would you yourself prefer this kind of scale of design, like the much larger design, or would you prefer this smaller design? It's interesting because when I look at the back Or say when I look at the front, I like the scale here much better. When I look at the back, I kind of like the scale of this one more, especially if I'm imagining it on a larger item like a bed. I guess if I was thinking about something smaller like a table runner, then this kind of scale would be ideal. Anything larger than that would really be too big for the constricted size of a table runner. But yeah, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Well, the studio is an absolute mess. I have stuff everywhere. I started by vacuuming, which is always a really good start, but now I need to do a serious declutter, or at least find more permanent positions for things, because in the studio now, I've been in here for at least 18 months and I'm at the point where I've got so much stuff, and I don't know how I ever fit this into our house before I had a studio. Somehow I did. Oh yeah, I didn't have a huge floor loom then. So since the big floor loom has arrived, I have a lot less space. I still have a really good amount of space in the studio. I just need to utilize it better so that things aren't sitting out all over the place. Anyway, I've made a start, and I'll get back to that after this. But at the moment, I'm just being a little bit in denial and thought I'll just sit on the couch and show you my sample instead for a little while. So I'm really happy to have my summer and winter sample off the loom. I did this on my smaller floor loom, the Louet David. And after the trials and errors, it's actually come out pretty well and I'm pretty happy with it. So I started out with something quite different to what I ended up with, which is a good thing because the thing I started out with wasn't all that great. So I started out with this section, and it was, the warp is 8/2 cotton, and what I tried to do for the weft was, I've got this really lovely fine merino wool, and it was in a really nice dark blue, like a darker than navy blue. And I thought that would just be fantastic. That would look really good as my weft. And I do like the way that it looks. It probably looks a little bit black on camera, but it is blue, trust me. The problem was that to get the right thickness of weft, I started out with 3 strands, winding 3 strands onto each bobbin to use all at once for every pattern shot. But that wasn't thick enough, it was kind of getting lost. So I then doubled that to 6 wefts per pattern shot. And while that was a little bit better, the problem was because the merino is so fine, it was just getting all tangled in the bobbin. It ended up being a bit of a headache. The second problem for this first section of the sampler was that obviously something was going on with my pattern, because I could see elements of the pattern that was supposed to be there, like this rose kind of shape here. But at the same time, I had these weird geometric blocks, and I was pretty sure that I had threaded properly, so I knew it couldn't be a threading issue. But as it turns out, and I explained already, it was a tie-up issue. So that was my first section. I was feeling pretty discouraged at this point because I wasn't really sure what was going on. And then I went into the midsection after Liz's help with the tie-up, and I got this, which I was really, really happy with, apart from one thing, and that was I wanted to see more blue, because when I look at the old summer and winter coverlets, they usually have like an indigo dyed weft, and it's extremely blue, and that was what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the white of the design, but for most of the weft I wanted to just see the blue, and what I was seeing with this one was a lot of white in between. I did switch up the weft in this one to a fingering weight wool instead, in a slightly lighter shade of blue. And also I was a little bit surprised by the scale of the design here. Not that that would be a bad thing for a coverlet, because if it's on a bed or whatever, then if the scale's really big, then that's okay. But the main problem was the amount of space, so that the pattern is not as bold as I wanted and not as much blue as I wanted. So then Liz suggested beading twice, because I was beading firmly for this sample, like very, very firmly. But she suggested beating on the open shed and then the closed shed once I closed it. So I did that, and this is the third part of the sample, which as you can see is much more closer to what I was after. You can see a lot more blue. The actual fabric is a lot thicker, which feels more suitable for what summer and winter should be. And you'll notice that the scale of the pattern is much smaller. Now this is, there are two reasons for that. Firstly, the closer beat, but also I believe in this part, I had been doing 2 picks where I should have been doing 1. So this is actually like double the scale of pattern. Interesting though, because if I ever did want to scale this pattern up, I know I could do that quite successfully by doubling it. But I do like the look of this one much more. Now it's still, after wet finishing and drying, I'm still not seeing as much blue as I would want to. And I think you have to really see it up close to see that the white and the blue still do look quite separate in the weft rows. But I'm much, much happier with this one. And I know that for the next one, I could have I could try a more open set. So I think that's what I'm going to do for my next sampler, because still, even though I had a bit more success by the end, I would still want to do another sampler because I want to be able to get this just the way I want it before I invest in a larger project, because that's the ultimate goal, is to make this a larger project, whether it be like a large throw or whether it be a coverlet, maybe. I'm still pretty apprehensive about the coverlet part, but at least now I have something really positive to go on, and I have something extra to try and get that extra blue coverage in. I'll also show you up close in a moment the back of these pieces. They look really lovely on the back as well, and even though I don't like to see as much white, I still think that that's a really lovely feature of summer and winter, that it's dark on one side and light on the other. That's why it's called summer and winter. Okay, well, I think I need to face the facts and get on with some of the stuff that needs to be done in the studio. I find that once I have a clear, clean and shiny space, there's something about shiny that just really helps to clear the mind. And once things are looking better and clearer, then I feel like I can get on with other projects and things that I want to be working on. So here's the current state of one part of the studio. As you can see, I just have a lot of stuff that is not put away, or doesn't seem to have a place at the moment. So I think what I should do at this time, and yes, I've got stuff on the floor as well, stuff on surfaces. I think the best thing to do would be for me to start with this table. You remember that this is actually a billiards table or a pool table, and it's got the covers on top, and I use it as a cutting space, a laying out space, and it's a really wonderful space to have. But as you can see, I've got a couple of looms on it at the moment. I've got a ton of random cardboard, a ton of random cones of thread that just haven't been put away, and it's just become a little bit of a dumping ground, and I just cannot work like that. So I'm going to start by just clearing up this space. Well, I wasn't going to tackle this area today, but the table there, it took me so little time realistically, and it looks so good. I feel so much better about it that I thought it's really not going to take me very long to do something about all of this. It's mostly just books and yarn sitting around, so I'll get on to doing that as well, and then I'll have two beautiful clean spaces. I think I've almost earned a tea break after all of that cleaning, but first I want to get one more thing done. I've been waiting for some extra Texsolv cords to arrive in the mail. I did order some, but I didn't order enough, so I got some of the cords done, but then I needed to order some more. So what happened initially when I set up this floor loom was I actually tried to use some seine twine to attach the cloth, to attach the back cloth beam to the back apron rod. The back apron rod is down here on the floor at the moment. And that seemed to work okay for a little while. I was weaving along quite happily with my project, and when I got to fairly close to the end, so when the apron rod went up and over this back beam here and started moving more towards me at the other end of the loom, at one point I retensioned the loom and at least one of the cords snapped. And that was a good lesson because it could have been much worse. Thankfully, the weaving sort of stayed put. It was only, if it had been all of the cords all at once, I would have been in real trouble. But I was able to repair that cord and then to keep going, being a little more careful with my tension. But that's one thing that I really love about this loom is how much tension it can achieve. So I wanted to make sure that I have really strong cords on here. So as I said, I bought some cords, but I didn't buy enough. Thought that I would have enough, but I didn't. So you can buy these Texsolv cords in whatever lengths you like. I have them in 10-meter lengths here. And then you can cut them to the length that you need. The idea with the Texsolv cords is, first of all, they're really strong, but also they have these little holes in them. a bit hard to see maybe, but they have holes at intervals right throughout the cord. And that means that you can use the cord itself in different ways, as I'm going to show you in a moment. You can use the holes for your various purposes. Sometimes you need Texsolv cords for tying up shafts. I've got a lot of Texsolv cords on this loom already, all involved up with tying up the treadles and the jacks and all of that. But hopefully they're going to be nice and strong on the back as well. So I've cut my cords to around 80 inches in length. And then I grab it and double it over, making sure there aren't any kinks or knots, so that the two ends meet, the two raw ends. And then I go back to the part that's doubled over. And I want to make it just the same as the other cords that I've done. So I'm just going to check which way I went in. Yep, so I came up from the bottom. There are holes all along this beam here. And I need to get this little loop up from the bottom hole and coming out through the top hole. This can be a little bit tricky, especially if your holes aren't all that straight. Sometimes you can just keep on poking it up and it'll come through, and other times you've got to use something like a threading hook. Even a piece of wire would probably do the job. There we go. It popped up after all. And then I'm going to bring the rest of the thread, the two other ends, around, and there's the loop at the top that's just come through, and I'm just going to pull those ends through so that now those ends are secured to the beam, and they'll get tied onto my apron rod in a moment, but I need to secure all my other ones first. You want to make sure you don't run out of thread like me, or cord rather. So I'm just going to try and evenly distribute them, just in case I don't have enough again, because I thought 10 meters would be enough the first time, and it certainly wasn't. Alright, so I'm just going to repeat that action again. This one's got a little knot in it, so I've got to undo that because that's going to be a problem. And get those raw ends to meet. And then I want to grab my loop and go through from the bottom. So then I'll just repeat that for as many other holes either as I want to, because you don't have to do every hole, or if I want to do every hole, then I'll keep going until I run out of cord, and I'll prioritize which holes I want to do. And once they're all done and they're exactly the same length and tied on the exact same way, then I can look at attaching the apron rod to them. I'm having my tea break while I work, so it's a compromise. All right, so I've got my cords on, and my next step is that I want to attach the apron rod. And the easy way to do that, I'm going to show you the little knot or the little loop first before I actually put it on the rod, because I think it's a little bit easier just to show it here before I do that. So with the end of the Texsolv cord, as I already pointed out, there are a bunch of holes through here. So I'm going to get like the end hole or close to the end. If the end hole seems a little bit weak, if it doesn't seem like it's going to hold, then use the next one. And I want to fold this cord over, and I want the whole width of that cord to go through that hole, which can be a little bit tricky because it's thick. But basically you open up the hole, and then you want to pull that cord through. Now the loop that you get once you pull the cord through, just imagine that my finger there is the apron rod. So it's going to go on the apron rod, and when it pulls tight, it's going to pull against the apron rod as well, and it's going to be a little slip knot kind of thing that holds in place. So that's how I'm going to attach all of these ties to the apron rod. So I'm going to do that now. So if I want to make sure that, like if I'm imagining that I'm actually tying on my rod ready for a project, then I want my ties to come over this back beam. So I'll just do that to begin with, because it's all too easy to forget to do that, and then you go to tie a project on and your apron rod's not positioned correctly, and that's not good. It doesn't work out well. So they just flopped all over, then it's no problem. You don't even have to think about it. So on the ends, I've got for each of my Texsolv cords, because I doubled them up, I've got 2 ends. So I'm going to be making loops with both of those, and I'm just going to try and uncross them a little bit as I go around the beam, just for the sake of neatness. And I've also got to try not to hit my head on this bar here. Ask me how I know about that. I have done it several times. So I'm going to make my little hole, and I'm going to push some of the cord width through that hole and pull up the loop. Okay, so there's my first loop. I'm going to grab my apron rod. It's just sitting on the floor at the moment. And I'm just going to loop that loop over the end, and then it'll tighten as I go. So I'll do the other side now. So opening up my loop, pushing some of that cord through. Oh, it's pretty fiddly sometimes. It's kind of a slippery cord. Okay, so that's my second loop. So I'm going to put that over the end, and I'll slide it up near the other one. And so those are my middle cords, so I want to keep them sort of located near the middle of my apron rod. And once I've got them in the middle, then I can work my way out with the other cords. You want to do them in order, so this will be the next one to go here, and this one will go here. Otherwise you're going to get crossing of cords. So I'm going to put the rest of those on now. We've moved to the dark corner of the studio, so I'm sorry about the slightly spooky studio lighting, but it's the best I can do in this situation. This is like the furthest corner away from the large windows. So it is what it is. It's where I've got my warping board, so I've got to make the best of it. So what am I doing here? Well, I was just showing you how I was organizing the apron rod for the larger loom. And this is part of a longer term plan to make some yardage, weave some yardage on the large loom, and to be able to make enough yardage to make a skirt out of it. Now, initially, let's say a month or 2 ago, when things were getting on top of me a little bit, I had plans to make a skirt class before the end of the year. And now that it's nearly the end of the year, I'm just thinking that was a completely insane idea, because it's going to require so much work, even just in the testing phases. And I've already done a lot of testing, but now I need to weave enough yardage on my big loom to actually be able to make a skirt, to put one together. And I wanted in the class to do 2 different styles. And so that means 2 lots of yardage for 2 skirts. And then I'd need to weave that yardage all over again to actually make the skirts for the class. So ordinarily there's so much that goes into just a fairly straightforward class, but for the skirt one, there's extra work. So I'm really glad that I admitted that I needed to just step back and not be doing that at this time. And instead I did a nice shorter class for the weaving school that turned out beautifully and wasn't too taxing on me. I still want to do the skirt class, but I'm not putting any pressure on myself to get it done within any sort of time frame. And I'm going to try and enjoy the process because it's always been a goal of mine to make a kind of tailored skirt out of my own hand-woven fabric. And so if I can do that and also make a class that other people can do, that will be really fabulous whenever that happens. Anyway, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting together the warp for that yardage. What happened as an extra stressor at the time, I didn't order enough yarn for the warp that I wanted to do. I'm usually fairly good at guesstimating yarn amounts for warps and so on. It's served me pretty well so far, but this time it's like an extra long warp. It is going to be a really wide warp, so it's a lot of yarn. And so I did order yarn and it came and that was all good. And then I made 2 warp chains. The warp chains are 300 ends each. And I realized towards the end of the second chain that I wasn't going to be having enough yarn to make many more chains. I'm on the 3rd chain now. And so, well, that was a little bit annoying because I had my plans to make my class and everything. But then I ordered more yarn, but then the yarn went on back order. So it was actually a fairly long time. I only just got the yarn last week, even though I ordered it ages ago. So that was something else that I hadn't allowed for. And that was just an extra stressor at the time when I was trying to get things done. But now, I mean, it's actually worked out quite well because I was like, well, I just can't move forward with this project until I've got that yarn. And that, I guess, was a blessing in disguise because everything kind of came to a head at that time and I had to take a break anyway. So yes, I'm making 4 warp chains, each 300 ends, 1200 ends total. That's a lot, isn't it? And then I still haven't decided. This is something I've found really difficult to make a final decision on, what weave structure I'm going to do. Because I always feel like when I warp up a floor loom that it's a bit of a waste of time to do plain weave on it. I mean, it's really fast to weave it up once you've got the loom all dressed, but all that time spent threading the heddles and so on. But the last time I actually made a garment out of some of my hand-woven fabric, I used a simple straight draw 4-shaft twill. And that was really nice because it made a really nice drapey fabric, but there was a problem, and that was the twill fabric, you know, it's got the diagonals running through it. When I was cutting out my pieces, by the time I came to sewing the garment together, even though I was careful with my pieces, moving them about and everything, they had stretched a little bit, particularly around the neckline. So the garment that I made, which was a tunic, and I love the tunic, but that neckline is just a little bit wide, and that's one of my pet hates in garments, is having a neckline that's too wide or too low. So I want to be pretty mindful of that this time, whether I use the twill or whether I do plain weave that's going to be a little bit more straightforward in the cutting out and sewing together perhaps. Don't know. I don't have to decide yet. I can decide closer to when I'm finishing this warp. And because I had decided on plain weave, I had definitely decided, but now I'm changing my mind and not sure what to do. But that's okay. That's not the most important part. The most important part is that I have the yarn and I've got the Texsolv cord that I needed for the apron rod, and that I'm going to be able to move forward with this project, which is great. So I have no set deadline for the class. At the moment, I'm going to enjoy putting this together, weaving the fabric, making myself a skirt, and if that goes well, then I will think about doing the class. Just one step at a time. And the other thing that I want to do for this project on the big loom is to try out the flying shuttle. I don't have the flying shuttle race on the loom yet. I have all the pieces sitting by the loom waiting for some action, waiting for me to happen. And the problem with that is I'm just not great at assembling things. I just struggle with it. And I don't really have good instructions at all. I haven't looked a lot on the internet yet. I haven't looked on YouTube or anything to see if anyone's got anything that is going to help me with that. But I'm confident that I'll be able to find some instructions that will help. But what I plan to do is enlist the help of my husband, who is a bit more technical minded than I am and is really good at putting things together and also enjoys the challenge. So one day soon, I need to get him out here and for us to set up that flying shuttle race together. Because I've got the weaving knowledge and he's got the technical skills. So it's a pretty good combination. So that's going to be important for this project because I haven't woven anything this wide before, ever. I've never had a loom wide enough to weave something this wide. So that's going to be interesting, and I'll want the flying shuttle to be able to do that. If you don't know anything about a flying shuttle or about what it is or what it's for, well, it's basically for weaving wider widths. So if you imagine you've got a really wide width on your loom in front of you and you've got an ordinary boat shuttle, you're going to struggle a bit to get from one side of the warp to the other and catch that boat shuttle on the other side and then get it back again. Rather tricky, right? So the flying shuttle, it's its own race that attaches to the front of the beater, and you have a special flying shuttle as well, which is a bit different to, it's a boat shuttle, but it's heavy and it's designed to go on this race, and you have some cord hanging down that you can pull the cord and that shoots the shuttle through. Sounds very simple, but apparently it takes a bit of skill and a bit of practice to be able to do it effectively. But I look forward to having a go at that. And I think that's going to help me a lot with my wide width. So that's the next thing. This is one of the areas that I'm hoping to do up a little bit. I spoke a little while ago about different projects that I wanted to accomplish on the homestead, especially now it's not just spring, but it's summer now. And the weather's finally starting to fine up after a lot of rain and cold weather that we've had. And it really makes you feel inspired to want to get out and do the outdoor projects. So this is one of them. This is our dam and it has this little deck on it. And this deck was probably stained at some point. But if it was, it hasn't been stained for a long time. It's very raw timber now. So I'd like to start by putting a nice stain on this so that it's nice and brown again, which will kind of complement the colours around the dam, which are very sort of what I think of as Australian colours. We've got a lot of gum trees, we've got the green of the reeds, and the dam itself is like a fairly brown kind of water, which is very normal for an Australian dam. And apart from putting a stain on this wood, I thought it would be really nice to have a bench seat here as well, so we can just come and sit. You can see in the afternoon there's quite a bit of shade cast by the trees, and it's a really pleasant breezy spot to sit and just overlook the water. It's a little bit of a neglected corner of our property though, because I think mainly because if you do want to sit, your only option is to sit actually on the deck. And we have done that a little bit. We've had a couple of little picnics here, which has been nice. But I think a bench seat would be really great. I've been looking on Facebook Marketplace pretty much ever since we moved in 18 months ago for secondhand bench seats, because I always like to buy secondhand things if I can. Of course I like to save the money, but also you can get some more interesting pieces of furniture by buying secondhand. You might get something that's been sitting in someone's garage for 30 years and that's always interesting, but I just really haven't found anything nearby that would be suitable to put here. So whether I make the decision to go ahead and buy a new bench seat or not, I will see, but keep your eyes out for the near future. This will be one of the projects that I will complete around the homestead. So this is a bit exciting. Yesterday, my husband and I finally got the flying shuttle race put on the big countermarch loom. I haven't used it yet. I need to actually get a warp on here first to be able to test it properly, but I can show you a couple of the basics of how it's going to work in case you're completely unfamiliar with them. So the actual race is this part here, and we had to replace the bottom of the beater. So this is not the actual bottom of the beater, this is part of the fly shuttle setup. And that was replaced with this. And then on each end of this race, we have these boxes. And the boxes have movable parts. And there's also the essential ingredient is the actual fly shuttle itself. This is a really heavy shuttle and it's quite large and quite different to the little boat shuttles I'm accustomed to using. So this is going to be interesting. But basically what we do is we pop the fly shuttle into one end of the box, and then we have a cord here in the middle. I need to get a better shot of that. So we have the cord set up here. One cord is attached to part of the first box, and then it's attached to the top of the loom. And then it's got this sort of Y cord in the middle with a pulley or a handle. I'm not sure, there's probably a specific name for this that I'm not getting. And then it's got the exact same setup on the other side for the box. And so the idea is that when I pull this, the shuttle, it pulls on this wooden part here, which makes the shuttle shoot across right to the other side of the loom. And as it goes into this box, it pushes that part, this little wooden part here, right to the end, and that tightens this cord, so that when I pull on this very same cord again, I get the same effect. The boat shuttle comes racing out, races across, and then when it reaches this box, on the other side, it pushes this wooden part again that's attached to the cord, and it ends up back there, and then it's just a chain reaction. Again, I can yank on this cord and off goes the shuttle. So I'm sorry if I didn't show that very well. It's such a large area, it's really hard to be able to film it. So this is going to be another interesting learning curve for this loom. Apparently there is a bit of a technique to it. The previous owner, Kerry, told me that it did take her a little while to get used to it. I guess it's having the right amount of pressure as well as having the right angle to ensure that the shuttle is doing its job, shooting from side to side rather than shooting halfway and then diving or shooting too hard or whatever it is. So for my next warp, I am planning a really wide warp, and so that's why I wanted to have the flying shuttle installed and to try it out, because I couldn't imagine trying to sit here at the treadles and trying to weave from this side to this side. I think I could do that, but for a limited time, because I think that would just be really hard on your back trying to get from side to side like that. Once I've finished winding the warp for this loom, which I've nearly done, and then once I've dressed the loom and of course threaded all the heddles, it's about 1,000 ends, I think, this one. No, it's actually 1,200 now that I think of it. So that's going to take a little while to do, but I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And of course I'll come back in future videos and show you how I'm going with the fly shuttle.